You have got to be kidding me! Zaxtal chittered, their crystalline mandibles clacking in what passed for laughter among the Arcsidians. That's what you're sending to represent your species in the exchange program? It looks like it would shatter if you breathed on it wrong. The human representative, Dr. Sarah Chen, maintained her professional smile despite having heard variations of this sentiment approximately 8,000 times since joining the Galactic Education Exchange Commission. She gestured to the holographic display showing various human athletic achievements, including Olympic performances and extreme sports footage. I assure you, Administrator Zaxtal, humans are quite resilient despite our apparent fragility. Emma here is one of our top students in both academics and athletics. Emma Martinez, the subject of their discussion, stood at parade rest nearby, trying not to fidget under the scrutiny of the alien administrator. At 5'7" and 140 pounds, she was decidedly average by human standards. Compared to the 8-foot-tall crystalline being examining her, though, she supposed she did look rather breakable. Resilient? Zaxtal's tertiary eyes swiveled independently to focus on different parts of Emma's body. Your species doesn't even have a proper exoskeleton. You're basically bags of water held together by... what did you call it? Calcium? Among other things, Dr. Chen replied diplomatically. But I think you'll find... and your atmospheric requirements, Zaxtal continued, warming to their favorite topic. The countless ways humans were obviously inferior to practically every other spacefaring species. The slightest variation in pressure or composition, and you start experiencing negative effects. Most species can at least handle a few hours in vacuum. Emma couldn't help herself. Yeah, but can most species survive being stabbed through the gut and still manage to drag themselves and an injured teammate to safety? The words were out before she could stop them. Dr. Chen shot her a warning look, but Emma pressed on. Because humans have done that. Multiple times, actually. We've got documented cases of people surviving ridiculous injuries and just keeping going. Zaxtal's crystalline form shifted through several colors in rapid succession, their species equivalent of sputtering. That's clearly propaganda. No species could... Would you like to see the medical records? Dr. Chen smoothly interjected, pulling up another holographic display. We have extensive documentation of human survival cases that most other species would consider impossible. It's one of the reasons we believe Emma will be an excellent addition to your student body. The administrator's color settled into a dubious mauve. Perhaps, but the liability considerations alone are all covered under the standard exchange agreements, Dr. Chen finished. Just as we've agreed to accommodate the special requirements of your crystalline students at our Earth facilities. The Commission has already approved everything. Emma watched the exchange with growing amusement. She knew Dr. Chen had been through this song and dance dozens of times before. The aliens always started out skeptical of humans' capabilities, but they usually came around once they saw humans in action. Usually after said humans did something that the aliens considered either impossible or criminally reckless, often both. Zaxtal's color shifted to a resigned blue-gray. Very well, the paperwork is in order, and the Commission has approved it. They turned all four eyes to Emma. But you will follow all safety protocols to the letter, understood? No unnecessary risks. Emma nodded solemnly, though she couldn't quite suppress her grin. Of course, Administrator. Safety first. Dr. Chen managed to wait until they were back in the transport before giving Emma a look. Really? You had to bring up the stabbing survival statistics? What? It's true! And you have to admit, their face, or crystalline structure thing was pretty priceless when you pulled up those medical records. Just try to be diplomatic once classes actually start. We're trying to improve interspecies relations, not give them all heart attacks. Dr. Chen paused. Do crystalline beings even have hearts? I should probably know that. Don't worry, Doc. I'll be on my best behavior. Emma's grin widened. Unless, something interesting happens. Dr. Chen just sighed. As it turned out, something interesting took less than 2 weeks to manifest itself. Emma had settled into her classes at the Galactic Exchange Academy with relatively little fuss. Yes, there had been the expected staring and whispered comments about her obvious squishiness. And yes, she'd had to explain multiple times that no, humans didn't actually need to be bubble-wrapped between classes. But overall, things were going smoothly. Until the incident in advanced xenobiology. They were studying comparative cellular structures, which meant practical lab work with various biological samples. Emma was partnered with Talax, a member of a silicon-based species that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a chrome Art Deco sculpture, and Breen, a floating gas cloud contained within a sophisticated environmental suit. I still don't understand, Talax was saying as they carefully manipulated their sample with specialized tools. How your species manages to maintain structural integrity without any sort of rigid external support system. We've got internal support, Emma replied, focusing on her own sample through a microscope. The skeleton provides structure, and muscles hold everything together. It works pretty well for us. But it's so inefficient, Breen chimed in, their voice coming through their suit's translator with a slight whistle. All that soft tissue exposed to potential damage. At least my species disperses impact across our entire gaseous form. Yeah, well, being squishy has its advantages too, Emma said. We're pretty flexible and... The rest of her sentence was cut off by a sudden alarm klaxon. Red lights began flashing throughout the lab. Warning, the automated system announced in multiple languages. Containment breach detected in Sample Storage Unit 7. Hazardous material release imminent. Please evacuate in an orderly fashion. The lab erupted into chaos. Students of various species began rushing for the exits, some flying, some rolling, some galloping on multiple legs. Emma was about to join them when she noticed Talax hadn't moved. What are you doing? We need to go. I can't. Talax's chrome-like surface had taken on a dull, worried sheen. My locomotor servos are locked up. I think the sample's electromagnetic properties affected my joint mechanisms. Emma looked at the exit, then back at her lab partner. The warning system was now counting down until the containment breach. Attention. Hazardous material release in 30 seconds. Oh, hell no, we are not doing this, Emma muttered, then raised her voice. Breen, help me with Talax! The gas cloud being hesitated. But the containment breach will be a lot worse if it reaches all the other samples in here. Come on. Together, they managed to get Talax's rigid form moving toward the exit. Emma took most of the weight, which was considerable, given that Talax was basically made of living metal, while Breen used their environmental suit's manipulator fields to help guide and stabilize them. Hazardous material release in 15 seconds. They were halfway to the door when there was a sharp crack from behind them. Emma glanced back to see Sample Storage Unit 7 developing spiderweb fractures across its surface. That's not good, she observed. The unit exploded. Emma didn't think. She just moved, shoving Talax forward while trying to shield them from the debris. She felt something sharp slice across her back, followed by a burning sensation that suggested whatever had been in that sample unit probably wasn't great for human biology. Emma! Breen's whistle had risen several octaves in alarm. You're leaking red fluid! Yeah, we do that sometimes, Emma grunted, continuing to push Talax toward the exit. It's fine. Keep moving. But, moving now, medical attention later. They finally made it through the door just as the emergency containment shield slammed down behind them. Medical drones were already converging on their position, and Emma could hear the rapid footsteps of the emergency response team approaching. She managed to help ease Talax down against a wall before her legs decided they'd had quite enough of this nonsense and buckled. She sat down rather abruptly next to her lab partner. See? She said, trying to ignore the way her vision was starting to swim. Told you being squishy has its advantages. Rigid external support structures are overrated. Talax's surface rippled with concerned colors. You're injured. Because of me. Nah, I'm just... Emma blinked hard, trying to focus. Okay, maybe a little injured, but it's fine. Humans are really good at healing. Ask Dr. Chen, she's got, charts and stuff. The medical team arrived just as Emma started to slump sideways. The last thing she heard before passing out was one of the alien medics exclaiming, "By the void, it's still conscious and attempting communication even with that level of toxin exposure? How is that possible?" Emma woke up in the medical bay 3 days later to find herself the center of what appeared to be an intense scientific debate. Absolutely unprecedented healing rate, one voice was saying. The cellular regeneration alone. But the sheer recklessness of the action, another voice countered. No regard for personal safety. That's kind of our thing, Emma croaked, causing several of the assembled aliens to jump, or float, or vibrate, in surprise. You're awake! Dr. Chen's familiar voice cut through the babble. She appeared at Emma's bedside, looking both relieved and exasperated. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck filled with angry wasps, Emma replied honestly. But I'm guessing that's better than I should be feeling, based on all the excited scientific muttering I'm hearing. You could say that. Dr. Chen's lips twitched. Apparently, the sample that breached containment was a particularly nasty biochemical compound that should have, and I quote, dissolved any carbon-based life form into its component molecules within minutes. Huh. Emma considered this. Well, that would have sucked. This drew a series of shocked whistles and clicks from the assembled alien medical staff. One of them, a being that appeared to be made entirely of shifting geometric patterns, moved closer to her bed. "You don't seem particularly concerned about your near dissolution," they observed. Emma shrugged, then immediately regretted it, as her back reminded her that it was still quite angry about recent events. "I mean, it didn't happen, so..." She paused. "Wait, how are Talax and Breen? Are they okay?" "They are both fine," Dr. Chen assured her. "Talax's locomotor systems have been repaired, and Breen's environmental suit protected them from any exposure. They've been quite worried about you, actually, along with most of the student body." "Most of the... what?" "Oh yes." Dr. Chen's smile had definitely taken on an amused edge. "Word got around about how you refused to evacuate without your lab partners, sustained a potentially lethal injury, and then continued functioning long enough to ensure their safety. You've become something of a celebrity on campus." "Great," Emma groaned. "Just what I needed, more attention on the squishy human." "Actually," the geometric pattern being interjected, "the general consensus seems to be that humans are significantly more durable than previously estimated. Several departments have requested permission to study your species' remarkable ability to continue functioning while injured." "Oh no," Emma said. "No way. I am not becoming a research subject." "Too late," Dr. Chen said cheerfully. "The commission is thrilled. Apparently your heroic actions have sparked unprecedented interest in human exchange students. We've received dozens of new applications from institutions that previously wouldn't even consider hosting humans." Emma let her head fall back against the pillow. "This is revenge for the stabbing statistics comment, isn't it?" "I have no idea what you mean," Dr. Chen replied innocently. "Now, would you like to hear about all the speaking engagements you've been invited to? Several prestigious academic institutions are very interested in your perspective on, quote, maintaining cognitive function while experiencing cellular dissolution. I hate you so much right now. Think of it as a learning opportunity. For science." Emma's retort was cut off by the arrival of Talax and Breen, who had apparently been lurking nervously in the corridor. Talax's surface was cycling through anxious patterns of color, while Breen's gaseous form was swirling in agitated eddies within their suit. "Emma!" Talax exclaimed. "We were so worried. The medics said the toxin should have been fatal." "Yeah, we get that a lot," Emma replied. "Humans are surprisingly hard to kill, much to the ongoing frustration of basically everything that's ever tried. But why did you stay?" Breen whistled softly. "You must have known it was dangerous." Emma looked between her two lab partners, trying to figure out how to explain something that, to her, seemed blindingly obvious. "Because you needed help? I mean, that's just what humans do. We see someone in trouble, we help. Sometimes it works out, sometimes we get a little dissolved, but we keep trying anyway." There was a moment of silence as the aliens processed this. "Your species is completely insane," Talax finally said, but their tone was admiring. "Wonderful, but insane." "That's also something we get a lot," Emma agreed. She turned to Dr. Chen. "So, about those speaking engagements." "Yes?" "Can I use them to talk about all the other crazy things humans have survived? Because I've got some great stories about people getting struck by lightning multiple times and just walking it off." Dr. Chen pinched the bridge of her nose. "I'm going to have so much paperwork to file." "That's a yes, right?" The assembled alien medical staff watched in fascination as Dr. Chen threw her hands up in surrender while Emma grinned triumphantly. Several of them were already taking notes on what appeared to be the human ability to negotiate while still technically recovering from near dissolution. And that was how Emma Martinez, who had only wanted to study xenobiology, accidentally became the galaxy's leading expert on humans are way more metal than you think, a scientific analysis of human durability and poor self-preservation instincts. She made sure to send Administrator Zaxtal a copy of her first published paper. Their response, a lengthy screed about liability concerns and proper safety protocols, colored in various shades of exasperated mauve, was framed and hung in her office at the Galactic Exchange Academy, where she eventually took a position teaching a very popular course called Comparative Species Resilience: Why You Should Never Assume the Squishy Ones Are Harmless. The course had a waiting list 3 terms long, and was required viewing for anyone considering hosting human exchange students. Emma considered this a win. Even if Dr. Chen still occasionally gave her grief about that first presentation on historical examples of humans just straight up, ignoring fatal injuries because they were too busy to die. Hey, at least she'd waited until she was fully healed to give that one. Mostly healed. Healing adjacent. Close enough. 5 years later. And that, students, is why you should never assume a human is incapacitated just because they've lost what they claim is a non-essential amount of blood, Emma concluded, switching off the holographic display that had been showing historical footage of various human survival stories. Any questions? Every appendage, tentacle, and sensory organ in the lecture hall shot up simultaneously. Emma suppressed a grin. This was always her favorite part of the semester. Yes, Kurextal? She nodded to a crystalline student who bore a striking resemblance to Administrator Zaxtal. In fact, Professor Martinez, my parent unit insists that your survival of the lab incident was a statistical anomaly and should not be used as a baseline for human capabilities. The young Arcsidian's surface flickered with embarrassment. They were quite insistent that I mention this during class. Ah, how is Administrator Zaxtal these days? Still writing strongly worded memos about proper safety protocols? They've actually compiled them into a book, Kurextal admitted. It's being published next month. Human-proofing your institution, a comprehensive guide to failing to prevent humans from doing the impossible. The class erupted in various species versions of laughter. Even the gaseous students' environmental suits were vibrating with amusement. Well, tell them I'm honored to have inspired such a comprehensive work, Emma said, and remind them that I'm still waiting for their response to my latest paper on the statistical improbability of human survival rates, why mathematics keeps getting it wrong. Another student, this one a floating collection of bioluminescent orbs, pulsed with curiosity. Professor, is it true that you're working with the Galactic Medical Council to revise the standard triage protocols for human patients? Oh yes, Emma brightened. That's been a fascinating project. Did you know that until recently, most alien medical facilities would declare humans clinically dead if their hearts stopped? Apparently, the idea that we can be successfully revived several minutes after cardiac arrest was causing quite a stir in the medical community. But how is that possible? A mantis-like student chittered. Once the primary circulatory organ ceases function. That's actually a perfect lead-in to next week's lecture on human medical miracles, why death sometimes needs a second opinion. Emma checked the time. Which reminds me, your assignment for next class is to review the case studies I've uploaded on the human practice of, quote, walking it off, and prepare a brief presentation on why this approach both fascinates and horrifies most non-human medical professionals. As the students filed out, or floated, or rolled, or in one case teleported, Emma noticed Dr. Chen leaning against the doorframe with an amused expression. Besides, applications to the Human Exchange Program are up 300% since we started requiring this course for all xenology majors. True, though I'm not sure whether that's because they're fascinated by human resilience or just want to see if you'll actually demonstrate the things you talk about in your lectures. Emma affected an innocent expression. I have no idea what you mean. That incident with the plasma torch was a completely unplanned demonstration of human heat tolerance. You set your arm on fire. Only a little bit. And it proved my point about our pain response mechanisms. Dr. Chen sighed the long-suffering sigh of someone who had spent the last 5 years dealing with Emma's unique approach to interspecies education. The commission wants to know if you'll consider writing a textbook. Apparently, your lecture notes have been circulating through some of the more prestigious academic institutions, and there's significant interest in standardizing your unique insights. A textbook? Emma perked up. Can I include the thing about the human who survived being struck by lightning 7 times? I suppose. And the guy who fell 30,000 feet without a parachute and lived? Within reason. Oh, what about... No explosions, Dr. Chen said firmly. You're no fun. Emma gathered up her teaching materials. Fine, but I'm definitely including the chapter on why humans think everything is potentially pet material. A study in terrible decision-making that somehow keeps working out. I still can't believe you managed to domesticate that silicon-based life form from Proxima b. Rocky is a very good boy, and I won't hear otherwise. As if summoned by its name, a crystalline creature that looked like a cross between a boulder and a puppy came bounding into the lecture hall, leaving small scratches in the floor with its diamond-hard claws. It made a sound like wind chimes in an earthquake, and proceeded to try to climb into Emma's lap despite weighing roughly as much as a small car. See? Emma scratched what passed for Rocky's ears, producing a melodious grinding sound that indicated happiness. "Who's a good, virtually indestructible boy? You are!" Dr. Chen watched the display with resigned amusement. "You know, when we first sent you here as an exchange student, I didn't expect you to revolutionize the entire field of xenobiology. To be fair, all I did was survive things that technically should have killed me. Multiple times. The revolution part just kind of happened. Speaking of which, the physics department asked me to remind you that quantum uncertainty does not mean you can ignore the laws of thermodynamics. That was one time. You broke causality, Emma. Only a little bit, and it snapped back into place eventually." Rocky made another chiming sound and attempted to lick Emma's face with its crystalline tongue. This had proven hazardous the first few times, but Emma had long since learned to dodge at just the right moment to avoid facial lacerations while still making Rocky feel appreciated. "Anyway," Emma said, extracting herself from under her mineral-based pet, "I've got a meeting with the xenolinguistics department. They want to discuss my theory about how human swear words somehow translate perfectly across all known languages, despite supposedly being impossible in several of them. Do I want to know how you discovered that? Probably not, but I promise this demonstration won't involve any property damage. Probably, most likely. I'm like 60% sure." Dr. Chen just shook her head as Emma headed out, Rocky clanking along behind her. Through the window, she could see a group of students gathered around the door to Emma's office, presumably waiting for her infamous office hours, where she told increasingly improbable but thoroughly documented stories about human survival. "At least she's wearing proper safety equipment these days," Dr. Chen muttered to herself. In the distance, there was a sound that might have been an explosion, followed by Emma's voice calling out, "That was totally supposed to happen. Also, does anyone know if human eyebrows grow back faster or slower the fifth time? Asking for a friend." Dr. Chen made a mental note to update the institution's insurance policy. Again, just another day at the Galactic Exchange Academy, where humanity's most notable traits, resilience, recklessness, and the utterly baffling ability to survive basically anything, were being carefully documented for the edification and horror of future generations of xenobiologists. And if the number of species applying for joint research projects with humans had increased exponentially since Emma started teaching, well, that was probably just a coincidence. Probably. Though Dr. Chen made sure to stock the medical bay with extra everything, just in case. You could never be too careful when humans decided to demonstrate their remarkable survival abilities. Especially if that human was Emma Martinez, who had turned surviving the unsurvivable into both an art form and a surprisingly well-funded research program. As another small explosion echoed through the halls, followed by the sound of enthusiastic scientific discussion and Rocky's crystalline barking, Dr. Chen decided it was probably time to start working on that insurance paperwork. Just in case. "Welcome to the 47th Annual Galactic Xenobiological Conference," the holographic announcer chimed pleasantly. "Today's keynote speaker is Professor Emma Martinez, presenting her controversial new paper, Hold My Beer, a scientific analysis of how human achievement correlates with statistically inadvisable decision-making." The conference hall was packed with beings of all descriptions. Some were floating, some were phase-shifting, and at least one appeared to be a sentient mathematical equation. All of them were focused intently on the human walking onto the stage, a human who had, in just 5 years, become simultaneously the most celebrated and most concerning figure in modern xenobiology. Emma took her place at the podium, adjusted her newly regrown eyebrows, which had, as it turned out, grown back slightly thicker after the 5th time, and grinned at her audience. "Before we begin, I'd like to address the safety concerns raised by certain members of the medical community." She paused significantly. "Yes, Administrator Zaxtal, I saw your latest memo. All 37 pages of it. I particularly enjoyed the section titled, Why Humans Should Not Be Allowed to Define What Constitutes a Safe Distance from Experimental Phenomena." A familiar crystalline form in the front row shifted to an embarrassed mauve. "However," Emma continued, "I would like to point out that today's demonstration has been fully approved by no less than 3 safety boards, 2 ethics committees, and 1 slightly concerned temporal paradox monitoring group. Also, I promised Dr. Chen that I wouldn't break causality again, so we're going to keep things relatively simple." The audience rustled nervously. They had learned that when Emma Martinez said, "relatively simple," it usually meant something that would end up being cited in future emergency response protocols. Now, who's ready to learn about how humans discovered most of our early medical treatments through what any rational species would consider absolutely insane trial and error? The next 2 hours involved a comprehensive, and occasionally explosive, demonstration of humanity's historical approach to medical discovery. Emma had brought along various historical recreations, including a detailed explanation of how humans discovered which plants were edible by just eating them and seeing what happened. A surprisingly engaging reenactment of early surgery techniques, with appropriate warnings for species sensitive to discussions of human internal anatomy. A fascinating digression into how many currently used medications were discovered through what Emma termed spectacular accidents. By the time she got to the section about how humans had basically invented trauma medicine through increasingly improbable survival stories, even the sentient mathematical equation was taking rapid notes. And that brings us to my personal favorite example, Emma said, pulling up a holographic display. The human ability to survive things that, by all mathematical and physical laws, should be instantly fatal. Or as I like to call it, why statistics keeps filing formal complaints about us. She gestured to Rocky, who had been serving as a very enthusiastic assistant throughout the presentation. The crystalline creature bounded forward, carrying a data crystal in its diamond-hard teeth. Thank you, Rocky. Now, let's look at some numbers that will make our physicist friends very upset. Dr. Chen, watching from the side of the stage, had to admit that Emma had come a long way from that first exchange student who'd accidentally revolutionized xenobiology by refusing to die when the math said she should have. She'd developed a real talent for making the utterly terrifying concept of human durability both entertaining and educational. The presentation was going surprisingly well. Only 2 minor explosions, and those had been entirely intentional, when a commotion broke out at the back of the hall. "Security breach in Experimental Wing 7, a robotic voice announced. "Containment failure of temporal anomaly research materials. All beings please evacuate in an orderly..." The rest of the warning was drowned out by the sound of reality hiccuping. A swirling vortex of chronological improbability began forming near the ceiling. "Oh, come on," Emma muttered into her microphone. "I specifically promised no causality breaks today." The audience began evacuating. Most of them had attended enough of Emma's lectures to know when things were about to get interesting in the worst possible way. The sentient mathematical equation briefly divided by zero in panic before pulling itself together and flowing toward the exit. "Professor Martinez," one of the security drones announced, zipping up to the stage. "The temporal anomaly is causing localized breakdown of physical constants. Standard containment procedures are proving ineffective." Emma looked at the growing vortex, then at her abandoned presentation, then at Dr. Chen, who was already pinching the bridge of her nose in anticipation of the paperwork this would generate. "How bad would it be if I—" "No," Dr. Chen said firmly. "But I could just— absolutely not. What if I got Rocky to— Emma." The vortex chose that moment to start eating chunks of the building's chronological stability. Parts of the conference hall began experiencing multiple time periods simultaneously. "Look," Emma said reasonably. "Either I can try something incredibly stupid that might work, or we can watch this temporal anomaly rewrite the last 5 years of xenobiological research, including all those lovely safety protocols everyone worked so hard on." Dr. Chen looked at the vortex, which was now causing several chairs to experience their entire existence simultaneously, from raw materials to eventual heat death. "Fine, but I want it noted that I strongly advised against whatever it is you're about to do." Emma grinned. "Noted. Rocky, here boy. How do you feel about helping me demonstrate why humans are the only species crazy enough to surf temporal anomalies?" Rocky made an excited chiming sound that suggested he was entirely on board with whatever terrible idea his human had come up with this time. "That's what I thought. Now, let me just adjust these gravitic stabilizers, and..." The next few minutes would later be described in no less than 17 different physics papers, 3 temporal mechanics dissertations, and 1 very lengthy insurance claim that had to be filed in triplicate across multiple timelines just to be safe. The short version was that Emma Martinez, accompanied by her crystalline pet rock dog, managed to stabilize a temporal anomaly through what she later described as applied human stupidity combined with sufficiently advanced mathematics. The longer version involved several completely new branches of physics, and at least 1 paradox that could only be explained through interpersonal interpretative dance. When the chronological dust settled, Emma found herself standing in the partly reconstructed conference hall, surrounded by very confused security drones and a slightly singed but very happy Rocky. Did Did you just surf a temporal anomaly on the back of a silicon-based life form while reciting quantum equations backwards? Dr. Chen asked weakly. Maybe. Emma patted Rocky, who was vibrating at several different frequencies simultaneously, but seemed otherwise fine. Though technically I think some of the equations were sideways. Time was getting a bit non-linear toward the end there. The Commission is going to have opinions about this. The Commission always has opinions. Emma brushed some temporally displaced dust off her jacket. Besides, think of the research opportunities. We just proved that human recklessness can actually alter fundamental cosmic forces if applied with sufficient enthusiasm. That's what I'm afraid of. Dr. Chen looked around at the conference hall, which was still experiencing some minor temporal fluctuations, but was gradually settling back into a normal relationship with causality. Though I suppose this does support your paper's thesis about human achievement correlating with statistically inadvisable decisions. Exactly, Emma brightened. This is perfect material for my next presentation. Why human problem-solving techniques shouldn't work but do anyway. A case study in temporal mechanics and poor life choices. Dr. Chen just sighed. I'll start the paperwork. As the cleanup crews began dealing with the various temporally displaced objects, and one very confused parallel universe version of Rocky that they decided to keep because, as Emma pointed out, you could never have too many silicon-based pets, Emma started making notes for her next lecture series. She had a feeling, Temporal Surfing 101, Why Humans Are Banned from Most Time Travel Research, was going to be very popular next semester. Assuming, of course, that the physics department ever forgave her for proving that the laws of thermodynamics could be temporarily suspended by what she termed sufficient application of human determination and poor impulse control. But that was a problem for future Emma. Or past Emma. Or possibly alternate timeline Emma. Time travel made temporal pronouns very complicated. To be continued. You know what really grinds my gears about these pompous space lizards? Sarah drummed her fingers on the holographic display, causing ripples of distortion in the alien text she was supposed to be translating. They think they invented everything. Like, literally everything. Commander Chen looked up from his own workstation, his weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of multiple screens. Let me guess, they're claiming they invented coffee next? Worse. Sarah spun her chair around, nearly knocking over her third cup of very human-invented coffee. They're saying they invented language. Not just their language, all language. According to the Grand Archives of the Zexith Imperium. She affected a mockingly formal tone. The gift of structured communication was bestowed upon the lesser races by their benevolent ancestors. That's actually hilarious, Chen chuckled, but his expression quickly turned thoughtful. Though I suppose from their perspective, watching younger species stumble their way into space while speaking what they consider primitive languages, it might seem that way. Sarah snorted. Yeah, well, they can take their superiority complex and shove it right up their... She froze mid-sentence, staring at a particular sequence of glyphs that had just scrolled across her screen. Holy shit! What? Chen was already moving toward her station, recognizing the tone in her voice. The one that meant either breakthrough or breakdown was imminent. Look at this. Sarah's fingers flew across the haptic interface, isolating a specific section of text. These aren't just similar patterns. This is Sanskrit. Well, not exactly Sanskrit, but it's so close it's undeniable. The root structures, the phonetic evolution. Commander, their ancient holy tongue is practically a dialect of Proto-Indo-European. Chen blinked slowly, processing the implications. You're telling me their revered ancestral language, the one they claim proves their cosmic superiority? It's basically Earth's linguistic grandmother. They've been running around the galaxy acting all high and mighty while literally speaking a corrupted version of human prehistoric languages. The commander's usually stoic face broke into a wide grin. Oh, this is too good. How certain are you? Sarah was already pulling up comparative analyses, her excitement making her bounce slightly in her chair. 97% confident on the core language structures. Look here. Their word for star comes from the same root as our astronomical terms. Their religious texts about ascending to the heavens use basically the same grammatical patterns as ancient Vedic writings. It's not just coincidence, it's systematic. But how is this even possible? Chen leaned in closer, squinting at the streams of data. We're talking about a species from a completely different part of the galaxy. That, Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with academic fervor, is the real question, isn't it? Either we're looking at the most improbable linguistic coincidence in the history of the universe, or— She left the sentence hanging. Or someone was playing games with both our species a very, very long time ago, Chen finished. He straightened up, tugging at his uniform jacket. A habit Sarah had learned meant he was about to say something official. How long would it take you to prepare a presentation on this? Sarah's eyes widened. For the Zaxith delegation? The ones arriving next week for the Cultural Exchange Summit? The very same. Chen's smile had turned decidedly mischievous. I think it's time we gave our scaly friends a little lesson in linguistic archaeology. Oh, this is going to be beautiful. Sarah cracked her knuckles and started organizing her data. Should I include the part where their sacred greeting, Zexkathal, literally translates to Sky Father's blessing in Proto-Indo-European? Include everything, Chen ordered, already heading for the door. I want to see their faces when they realize they've been accidentally speaking human languages while making fun of human languages. Sarah called after him. Their faces don't actually move much, sir. Then I want to see their tail twitches of dismay. The next week passed in a blur of preparation, coffee, and increasingly amusing discoveries. Sarah found herself falling down a rabbit hole of linguistic connections that went far deeper than she'd initially realized. The Zaxith's supposedly unique writing system clearly evolved from the same roots as ancient Sanskrit scripts. Their divine numbers, suspiciously similar to early Indo-Arabian numerical systems. By the time the Zaxith delegation arrived at the United Earth Embassy on Mars, Sarah had assembled what she considered to be the academic equivalent of a tactical nuclear weapon. She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her formal uniform and practicing her opening lines in perfect ancient Zaxith, which, she now knew, was essentially just slightly mangled Sanskrit with extra clicks thrown in to make it sound alien. The presentation chamber was packed. Humans and Zaxith sat in carefully segregated sections, the latter's scales gleaming under the artificial lighting. At the front, the Zaxith cultural minister, Texkalon, was just finishing his opening speech. And so we continue our generous mission of cultural uplift, sharing the sophisticated linguistic heritage of our ancestors with the younger races who— Sarah caught Chen's eye from the sidelines and received a subtle nod. Showtime. She stepped up to the podium, activated her presentation displays, and began speaking in flawless ancient Zaxith. The reaction was immediate. Scale crests rose in shock across the alien section of the audience. Several of the older Zaxith actually fell into their species equivalent of a swoon, their tails going rigid with shock. Honored representatives, Sarah continued, switching smoothly between ancient Zaxith and its modern variant. I come before you today to discuss a fascinating discovery regarding the origins of your sacred ancestral tongue. She paused for effect, savoring the moment. Specifically, its relationship to human prehistoric languages. What followed was 45 minutes of the most devastatingly polite academic dismantling in the history of interspecies relations. Sarah walked them through the evidence step by step, watching as the Zaxith delegates' colors shifted through various shades of distress. She showed them pronunciation patterns, grammatical structures, shared root words, and finally, the coup de grace played recordings of ancient Earth languages alongside their sacred texts. The similarities were undeniable. In conclusion, Sarah said, now speaking in modern Zaxith, it appears that rather than your species gifting language to humanity, we share a far more interesting historical connection. One that raises fascinating questions about early interstellar contact and the true history of both our peoples. The silence that followed was broken only by what sounded suspiciously like a human stifling laughter in the back row. Cultural Minister Tex Kylon rose slowly, his scales shifting through colors so rapidly it was making some of the humans dizzy. This is preposterous. Our language is divine in origin, passed down from the star ancestors themselves. Sarah smiled sweetly. Indeed, Minister, and I look forward to working with your linguists to uncover the truth about these star ancestors. Perhaps together we can discover why they chose to teach both our species languages derived from the same source. She switched to perfect Sanskrit for her final line. After all, the pursuit of knowledge knows no boundaries. The Zaxith delegation's translator device sparked and died trying to process that last bit, but the meaning was clear enough from context. Several of the younger Zaxith were already pulling out their data devices, surreptitiously checking her claims. In the end, it was one of the junior Zaxith scientists who broke protocol. She stood up, her scales flushed with excitement rather than embarrassment, and asked, "Does this mean our peoples might have interacted in the deep past? That we share more history than we knew? That, Sarah replied, is exactly the kind of question we should be asking. Instead of debating which of our species is more linguistically sophisticated, perhaps we should be working together to solve this ancient mystery. The chamber erupted in discussion, with humans and Zexith actually beginning to mingle as the implications sank in. Sarah caught snippets of conversation in various languages, modern and ancient, human and alien, all swirling together in a linguistic soup that seemed to support her point better than any academic presentation could. Commander Chen appeared at her elbow as she was packing up her materials. "Well done, Doctor, though I notice you left out the bit about their sacred greeting." Sarah grinned. "Always leave something in reserve, sir. Besides," she nodded toward where several Zixith scholars were already engaging their human counterparts in excited discussion. "I think they're going to figure that one out on their own soon enough." Indeed. Chen watched the mixing crowd with satisfaction. "You know, when we first encountered the Zexith, everyone was so focused on their advanced technology that we forgot to really look at their culture, their history. Their language," Sarah added. "Exactly. Turns out the key to bringing our species together wasn't in their fancy ships or our adaptability. It was in words that were old before either of our species reached the stars." Sarah closed her datapad with a decisive click. "Think they'll stop making fun of our primitive languages now?" A passing Zexith scholar, who had apparently been eavesdropping, answered before Chen could. "Perhaps," she said, her scales rippling with what Sarah had learned to recognize as amused embarrassment. "We should all simply admit that the universe is more complex and more interconnected than we imagined." "I'll drink to that," Sarah said. "Coffee? Is that the bitter stimulant beverage you humans favor?" "The very same. And before you ask, no, your ancestors didn't invent it. But I'm willing to share anyway." The Zexith scales flickered with laughter. "In that case, I would be honored to partake in this human tradition." As they headed for the embassy's cafe, Sarah heard the scholar muttering what sounded suspiciously like Sanskrit under her breath, testing out the ancient sounds with new understanding. Around them, humans and Zexith were already forming small discussion groups, comparing notes and trading theories about their shared linguistic heritage. Commander Chen watched them go, then pulled out his own datapad and began composing a message to United Earth Command. The subject line read, Zexith Cultural Exchange Summit, Unexpected Breakthrough in Interspecies Relations via Historical Linguistics. He paused, then added, P.S. Recommend immediate increase in funding for Comparative Linguistics Department. It turns out words might be our most powerful first contact tool. In the cafe, Sarah was already teaching her new Zexith colleague the proper way to order a cappuccino, in Sanskrit naturally. The universe, she reflected, had a pretty good sense of humor sometimes. Here they all were, thinking first contact was about advanced technology or biological differences, when all along, the key to understanding each other was hidden in the words they'd been using to misunderstand each other. She watched as the Zexith scholar took her first sip of coffee, scales rippling in surprise at the taste. Strong, the alien commented in ancient Zexith. That's humanity for you, Sarah replied in the same language. We may not have invented language, but we definitely perfected caffeination. The scholar's scales rippled in what Sarah was starting to recognize as genuine amusement. Perhaps, she said, switching to modern English with only a slight accent. We all have something to teach each other. Now that, Sarah raised her cup in a toast, is definitely worth learning how to say in every language we can find. Around them, the sounds of dozen different languages, human and alien, ancient and modern, filled the air, weaving together into something new and unexpected. Something that sounded, Sarah thought, a lot like progress. The ancient library. 3 months after what became known as the Sanskrit incident, Sarah found herself in a very different kind of meeting. The Zexith had invited a select team of human linguists to their homeworld, specifically to a facility they'd always kept strictly off-limits to other species, the Archive of the Star Ancestors. I still can't believe we're actually here, Sarah whispered to Dr. Patel, her colleague from the Sanskrit Studies Department at Oxford. They stood in an enormous chamber that seemed to stretch endlessly upward, its walls lined with what looked like crystalline data storage devices. Neither can they, I suspect, Patel replied, nodding toward their Zexith guides, who still managed to look slightly embarrassed despite their alien features. Nothing quite like discovering your holy library might actually belong to someone else's ancestors to make you rethink your access policies. The head archivist, whose name was essentially unpronounceable even in modern Zexith, but who had asked them to call her K, approached with an ancient data crystal. "This," she said, her scales shifting in what Sarah had learned was a pattern indicating both excitement and anxiety, "is our oldest preserved record. We've never been able to fully decode it." Sarah accepted the crystal with reverence, noting its familiar structure. "This looks exactly like the data storage devices found in the Mohenjo-Daro ruins," she said, then watched as Kay's scales went through their entire color spectrum in shock. "The what ruins?" "Oh boy," Patel muttered. "Here we go again." Sarah couldn't help but grin as she explained. "An ancient human civilization in what we now call the Indus Valley. They left behind similar crystals, but we could never power them up without damaging them. You wouldn't happen to have a working reader for this format, would you?" Kay's tail twitched in what might have been embarrassment or excitement. Sarah was still learning to read the subtleties. "We have maintained functional replicas based on preserved specifications. But surely you're not suggesting that your star ancestors might have visited Earth? Well, someone certainly did. And they left behind more than just linguistic influences." Sarah held up the crystal. "Shall we see what secrets this holds?" The next few hours were a blur of activity as human and Zaxith scientists worked together to access the ancient data. When they finally succeeded, the holographic display that sprang to life left everyone in stunned silence. It showed a star map, a very, very familiar star map. "That's the Indus Valley," Sarah said at the same time Kay exclaimed. "That's the sacred valley of first landing." They stared at each other across the hologram, the implications sinking in. "Well," Patel said dryly, "I guess we know where your star ancestors went on their holidays." The crystal contained more than just maps. As they dug deeper, they found what appeared to be anthropological records, detailed studies of both early humans and Proto-Zexith, written in a language that seemed to be the true ancestor of both Sanskrit and ancient Zaxith. "They were studying us," Kay said, her voice filled with wonder. "Both of us, like we were their science project or something." "More like their children," Sarah suggested, pointing to a particular passage. "Look at the way they describe both species. There's an emotional investment here. They weren't just studying us, they were nurturing us, guiding our development." "But why did they leave?" one of the younger Zexith researchers asked. "And why did they guide our languages to develop along such similar paths?" Sarah was about to respond when a new hologram activated. This one showing what was unmistakably a humanoid figure standing next to what appeared to be an early Zexith. The text scrolling beside the image made her gasp. "They didn't leave," she translated slowly. "They merged with us, both of us. The star ancestors literally became our ancestors." The implications hit everyone at once. Humans and Zexith weren't just linguistically linked, they were genetically related, if distantly. The star ancestors had somehow merged their genetic material into both species, guiding their evolution while preserving crucial elements of their culture through language. "So when we say we share common ancestors," Patel began, "we mean it quite literally," Kay finished, her scales showing a pattern that Sarah had never seen before, one that seemed to indicate a profound sense of connection. The chamber fell silent as both species processed this revelation. Finally, Sarah spoke up, unable to resist. "So, does this make us cousins?" Kay's scales rippled in what was definitely amusement. "Perhaps, though I believe the human term siblings who won't stop arguing might be more accurate." "Wait until the cultural minister hears about this," one of the junior archivists said. "First we find out we're speaking human languages, and now we find out we're practically related." "Actually," Sarah said, examining another section of text, "I think both our species have been speaking star ancestor languages all along. We just took different paths with the same inheritance." "Like siblings," Kay agreed, then added with what could only be described as a mischievous scale pattern. "Though obviously we're the more sophisticated sibling. Says the species that needed humans to translate their own ancient texts." Patel shot back good-naturedly. "Children," Sarah interrupted in perfect star ancestor dialect, causing everyone's translation devices to short out again. "Play nice." The laughter that followed wasn't just human or Zaxith, it was something new, something shared. As they continued to explore the archive, Sarah couldn't help but think about how languages had evolved on Earth, how they split and merged and influenced each other in an endless dance of communication. Now that dance had expanded to include the stars themselves, and the steps were being performed by species who had only just discovered they were dance partners all along. "You know what this means," she said to no one in particular as they prepared to dive into another crystal's worth of data. We're going to have to completely rewrite every linguistics textbook in both our worlds. And every history book, Kay added. And possibly some biology books too, Patel chimed in. Worth it, they all said simultaneously in 3 different languages that, they now knew, all came from the same source. Above them, the holographic stars continued their silent dance, marking out the paths their ancestors had traveled. Both the ones they'd known about and the ones they were only just beginning to discover. Somewhere in that ancient light, Sarah thought, the star ancestors must be either laughing at their surprise or proudly nodding at their discovery. Probably both. The Star Song, 1 year after the discovery in the archive of the star ancestors. Humanity and the Zexith found themselves facing an unexpected challenge. The revelation of their shared heritage had sparked a galaxy-wide archaeological frenzy, with both species racing to uncover more evidence of their mysterious common ancestors. But it was on a small, seemingly insignificant moon in the Tau Ceti system that everything changed again. Please tell me you're seeing this. Sarah's voice crackled over the comm system. She stood in an ancient chamber deep beneath the moon's surface, her helmet lights illuminating walls covered in familiar crystalline formations. If you mean the fact that we're standing in what appears to be a star ancestor karaoke bar, then yes, I'm seeing it, responded Dr. Patel, who had become her regular partner in these expeditions. Kay, who had insisted on joining this particular mission, made a sound that her translator rendered as somewhere between a laugh and a hiccup. That's not exactly what this is, but you're not entirely wrong either. The chamber was circular, its walls lined with crystals that seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. In the center stood what could only be described as a podium, though its design suggested it was meant for something more significant than simple speeches. It's a harmonics chamber, Kay explained, her scales shifting through excited patterns. According to some of our oldest legends, the star ancestors could sing to the universe itself. Sarah approached the podium, noting how its surface responded to her proximity with subtle changes in luminescence. You mean like the theoretical quantum harmonic connections we've been studying? The ones that seem to link certain astronomical phenomena? Exactly. Kay moved to join her, her own scales beginning to glow slightly in response to the ancient technology. We always thought it was just a metaphor, the idea that they could sing to the stars. But what if they literally used harmonics to manipulate quantum states? Patel finished, already pulling out his scanning equipment. That would explain some of the more unusual properties we've observed in their technology. Sarah ran her hand over the podium's surface, feeling a subtle vibration. Without thinking, she began humming an ancient Sanskrit hymn, one of the oldest known to humanity. The effect was immediate and stunning. The crystals around them blazed to life, and a harmonic resonance filled the chamber. More surprisingly, Kay's scales began to glow in perfect synchronization with the crystal pulses. That's our most sacred ancestral tone sequence, Kay said in astonishment. How did you know it? I didn't, Sarah replied, equally shocked. That was the Samaveda hymn of creation, one of humanity's oldest surviving musical pieces. Patel's scanner was going crazy. The frequencies match. They're exactly the same sequence, just separated by thousands of years and light years of space. Of course they are, a new voice said, causing everyone to spin around. In the center of the chamber, a holographic figure had appeared. Humanoid, but not quite human, with features that somehow managed to suggest both human and Zexith characteristics. A star ancestor, Kay breathed, her scales now glowing so brightly they almost hurt to look at. The figure smiled. We had many names, but that one serves as well as any. We've been waiting a long time for our children to find their way back here. Sarah's scientific mind was racing. You're not really here, are you? This is some kind of quantum-locked AI system, triggered by the harmonic sequence? Smart girl. The figure's smile widened. Always asking the right questions, just like your ancestors. Both sets of them. She? Gestured around the chamber. This is a key, you see. One of many we left scattered across the galaxy. We couldn't directly give you the knowledge. That would have stunted your growth. But we could leave breadcrumbs. The shared languages, Patel said. The similar technological foundations? The compatible harmonics in our biology, Kay added, her scales still pulsing in time with the chamber's resonance. All threads in the same tapestry, the figure confirmed. We didn't just guide your evolution. We created a path for you to follow back to each other, and eventually to what we discovered. Which was what? Sarah asked, though something in her bones told her she already knew the answer. That the universe itself is a song, the figure said simply. And when you learn to sing it properly. The hologram gestured, and suddenly the chamber seemed to expand, showing them a view of reality that made their minds spin. Quantum strings vibrated like harp strings, dark matter flowed like music given form, and the very fabric of space-time danced to rhythms they could almost understand. Holy shit, Patel eloquently summarized. Indeed, the figure seemed amused. This chamber is both a lesson and a test. The fact that you triggered it together, completely by accident, using harmonics preserved in both your cultures, well, that suggests you're ready for the next step. Which is? Kay asked. Learning to sing together, of course. The figure's form began to fade. The universe is vast, and its song complex. It takes many voices, working in harmony, to truly join the cosmic choir. Wait! Sarah called out. We have so many questions! Of course you do. You're our children, after all. The figure was almost gone now, but you don't need us to answer them anymore. You have each other, and you have the song. As the hologram vanished, the chamber's crystals settled into a soft, pulsing glow. The three scientists stood in silence for a moment, processing what they'd just experienced. Finally, Sarah spoke. So, who's up for some interspecies choir practice? Kay's scales rippled with laughter. You know, in all our sacred texts about the star ancestors, they never mentioned their terrible sense of humor. I'm starting to think that might have been a human contribution. Hey, Sarah protested. I'll have you know that puns are a highly sophisticated form of communication. Children, Patel interrupted in the star ancestor dialect, perfectly mimicking the hologram's tone. Focus. We have a universe to sing to. As they began the careful process of documenting and studying the chamber, Sarah couldn't help but think about how far they'd come. From linguistic squabbles to shared heritage to this, whatever this was. You know what this means, she said as they worked. We're going to have to rewrite the physics textbooks too. And the music theory ones, Kay added. And probably every other textbook we've got, Patel concluded. They looked at each other and spoke simultaneously in three languages that were really one. Worth it. Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance, but now they could hear the music that accompanied it. And somewhere, in dimensions they were only beginning to understand, their ancestors watched and listened as their children began to learn the universe's oldest song, the resonance protocol. That's not how you do it! Sarah's exasperated voice echoed through the quantum harmonics lab. You can't just mash frequencies together and hope they work. This isn't a garage band. We're trying to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. 6 months had passed since the discovery of the star ancestors' harmonic chamber, and progress had been interesting. The Joint Human Zexith Research Initiative, dubbed Project Orpheus by someone with a flair for mythological references, had taken over an entire space station in neutral territory. Kay's scales flickered with what Sarah had learned was the Zixith equivalent of an eye roll. Perhaps if your species didn't insist on treating quantum harmonics like some kind of concert. Actually, Dr. Patel interrupted from his workstation, where complex wave patterns danced across multiple holographic displays. She's right. Look at these concordance patterns. The star ancestors didn't just randomly combine frequencies. They wove them together like a symphony. A symphony that can literally bend space-time, Sarah added, unable to keep the excitement out of her voice despite her frustration. We're just missing something, some fundamental principle that ties it all together. That was when the station's alert system began blaring. Folks? Commander Chen's voice came over the intercom. We've got a situation up here. You might want to see this. The three scientists rushed to the observation deck, where Chen stood staring out at what should have been empty space. Instead, they saw a massive distortion, like a heat mirage scaled up to cosmic proportions. Please tell me that's not our fault, Sarah said, though she already knew the answer. According to these readings, Chen replied, gesturing to a nearby display, it's resonating with exactly the frequencies you were just working with. But it's growing. Kay's scales had shifted to their warning coloration. Those patterns, they're similar to what we saw in the harmonic chamber, but they're wrong somehow. Discordant. Like feedback, Patel muttered, already running calculations on his tablet. We created a quantum harmonic feedback loop, and if these numbers are right, it's going to keep growing, Sarah finished. Until it tears a hole in space-time, Kay concluded, her scales now pulsing with urgent patterns. We need to stop it. How? Chen demanded. Can we just turn it off? Sarah was already shaking her head. It's self-sustaining now. We need to cancel it out. Like acoustic noise cancellation, but on a quantum level. The star ancestors must have had fail-safes for this kind of thing, Patel reasoned. They wouldn't have left us this technology without the hymn, Kay suddenly exclaimed. Sarah, remember how the harmonic chamber responded to both our ancient songs? What if we tried combining them properly this time? Sarah caught on immediately. Not mashing them together, but harmonizing them. They finished together. Chen looked between them. Whatever you're going to do it fast. That distortion is starting to affect our structural integrity. The next few minutes were controlled chaos as they rushed back to the lab. Sarah and Kay took their positions at the quantum harmonic interface, a modified version of the podium they'd found in the ancient chamber, while Patel coordinated the frequency modulators. Ready? Sarah asked, her hands hovering over the controls. Kay's scales had settled into their focused configuration. Ready, though I feel compelled to point out that if we get this wrong, we create an even bigger tear in space-time and potentially destroy this entire sector? Sarah grinned, just like karaoke night back in grad school. Your species' use of humor in crisis situations continues to baffle me, Kay replied, but her scales showed amusement. They began. Sarah started with the ancient Sanskrit hymn, letting the pure tones flow through the quantum interface. Kay joined in with the Z-axis harmony, their frequencies weaving together in patterns that seemed to resonate with reality itself. On his displays, Patel watched as the wave functions began to align. It's working. The distortion is responding to the harmonic pattern. Just keep it steady and... That's when everything went sideways. Literally. The station lurched as a new wave of quantum distortion hit them. Alarms blared, and for a moment Sarah could have sworn she saw multiple versions of the lab overlapping. Like reality itself was having trouble deciding which version should exist. We need more power! Kay called out, her scales now glowing bright enough to cast shadows. The feedback loop is fighting back! We don't have more power! Patel shouted back. We're already redlining the quantum core. Sarah stared at the harmonics display, watching the patterns twist and dance. Something about them seemed familiar, not just from their research, but from... We don't need more power, she said suddenly. We need more singers. Before anyone could stop her, she hit the station's broadcast controls, sending their harmonic pattern out on all frequencies. This is Dr. Sarah Chen of the Human Zexith Research Initiative. If you can hear this signal, we need your help. Match these frequencies. Sing with us. Are you insane? Patel yelped. You can't just ask random ships to... But it was already happening. First one signal, then another, and another joined their broadcast. Ships from both species, happening to pass through the sector, began responding to the harmonic pattern. Like an impromptu choir spanning light years, they added their voices to the song. On Patel's displays, the wave functions began to stabilize. The quantum distortion, faced with a harmony it couldn't corrupt, started to collapse in on itself. It's working! Kay's scales were pulsing in time with the combined frequencies. The feedback loop is breaking down! Sarah felt it the moment everything clicked into place. The harmonics weren't just canceling out the distortion, they were teaching it a new pattern. Like parents showing children how to sing in key, they were teaching space-time itself a better way to resonate. The distortion collapsed with what felt like an audible pop, though sound couldn't actually travel through space. In its place remained a subtle shimmer, like the aurora borealis stretched across the stars. What is that? Commander Chen's voice came over the intercom, filled with wonder. Kay checked her readings, then did something Sarah had never seen before. Her scales shifted through every color in their spectrum at once. It's a quantum harmonic lattice. Stable, self-sustaining, and beautiful. We didn't just stop the feedback loop, Patel realized, staring at his data. We created something new, something the star ancestors might have been trying to teach us how to build all along. Sarah looked out at the shimmering lattice of quantum harmonics. A network, she said softly. They wanted us to learn how to weave the fabric of space-time together. Not just to travel through it, but to sing to it, to make it better. And it took both our species working together to figure it out, Kay added, along with about 24 random ships that probably think we're completely insane now. Speaking of which, Patel checked his communications panel. We're getting a lot of messages. Everyone wants to know what just happened, and... He winced slightly. The Zexith High Council and Earth Central Command are both demanding immediate reports. Tell them... Sarah paused, considering. Tell them we just had our first successful quantum choir practice. I am not putting that in an official report, Chen's voice cut in. Fine, Sarah conceded. Tell them we've made a breakthrough in quantum harmonic engineering through cross-species collaboration. And maybe leave out the part where we almost ripped a hole in space-time. Too late, Kay said, checking her own communications. My scales are already getting messages from other Xexith who felt the harmonic distortion. They're excited. Excited about almost destroying a sector of space? Excited about proof that the star ancestors' gifts went beyond language and genetics, that we truly are meant to shape the universe together. Kay's scales settled into a pattern of deep satisfaction. Also, several of them want to know when the next choir practice is. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. You know what this means, right? That we're going to have to rewrite the quantum physics textbooks? Patel suggested. That too. But I was thinking... Sarah gestured to the shimmering quantum lattice outside. We're going to need a bigger music room. As if in response, the lattice pulsed with new patterns, its quantum harmonics singing softly to anyone who knew how to listen. And for the first time, both humans and Xixith were starting to understand the lyrics. To be continued.